So today we will be working on part 1 of our experiment, dissolve the shell. So what we are trying to do is dissolve the shell of our egg in order to expose the cell membrane. Because as you know, eggs are covered by a hard outer covering called a shell. So what we're going to do is simply take one raw egg, just like this one here, a beaker like this one here, or a cup works just as well. I'm gonna place the egg inside of the beaker, and I'm gonna take some plain white vinegar and pour it over top of the egg in the beaker, just until the egg is submerged or totally covered by the vinegar. So something like that. Now we are simply going to wait for 24 hours and come back and check on our egg then.
24 hours later.
Now all I've done is drain the vinegar off of my egg and left it inside of the beaker. Now from the video, you can probably just see that the egg looks almost the same. But if you could touch the egg, you would feel that it's now squishy and not hard on the outside. So now all I'm going to do is take my white vinegar and pour more vinegar just until my egg is submerged. We will leave it for 24 hours more to soak, and then we'll come back and move to our next step.
Another 24 hours later.
All right, so it has now been 48 hours that my egg has been soaking in vinegar, and now we are ready to move on to part 2, the cell membrane in action. So the first thing that I am going to do is very, very carefully drain the vinegar off of my egg. So as you can see here, I'm going to take my egg and drain all of the vinegar off of it into the sink. Now that I have drained my vinegar off of my egg, I have my egg inside of my beaker here. I'm going to very, very, very carefully remove it from the beaker. Remembering that even though it feels a little different, this is still a raw egg. So we want to make sure that we are being very gentle with it. Now I am wearing gloves simply because vinegar stinks. There's nothing dangerous about touching this, okay? So now what I'm going to do is collect my before data before my second round of soaking. So what I'm going to do is take this ruler and get an approximate measurement of the length, which I see is about 6 centimeters, and the width of my egg, which I see is about 4.75. I'm going to simply write that down here, and I will transfer that into my data table when I'm done. Now going to turn on my scale to measure the mass of my egg before the second soaking. So what I want to do is make sure that my egg is nice and dry before weighing it. So I'm going to pat it off with a paper towel. I only want to know the mass of the egg, not the mass of any extra vinegar that may be stuck on the outside. So now I'm going to very carefully, with my scale zeroed, place my egg onto the balance, making sure that it's not rolling anywhere. And I can see that the mass looks like it is 83.7 grams. I will record that here. And again, transfer it to my data table when I'm done. Now I'm going to take my egg, carefully as usual, and place it back into a beaker. I'm using a clean beaker here, but you can use the same beaker. Very carefully placing it inside. Now we're ready to get our egg soaking in the second liquid. So what I'm going to do is create some colored water in another beaker to pour over top of my egg. So I've gotten a little bit of water from my sink, and then I'm going to take a few drops of food coloring and drop it in. I'll give it a quick little stir just to make sure it's all mixed in. And then all we need to do is take our water and pour it over top of our egg, once again, just until it is submerged. Now, just like we did in part 1, I'm going to leave my egg to soak for 24 hours, and we will come back to check on it then. So it's now been 24 hours since we placed our egg into our colored water. Now we're ready to move on to part 3. The first step is for me to carefully remove the colored water from my egg. I'll be right back after doing that. Now that I've drained all of the colored water off my egg, I'm ready to carefully remove my egg from the beaker and take all of my necessary measurements. So as with all of our other steps, remembering that we still have a raw egg here, so being very gentle and careful, I'm going to remove it and then carefully pat off any excess liquid on the egg. I'm then going to use my ruler to measure the length and approximate width of the egg. You can see that we look to be about 6.5 centimeters long and about 5.5 centimeters wide. Now ready to use my scale to take the mass of the egg. So making sure that my scale is zeroed first, carefully placing my egg onto the balance. And I can see that the mass of my egg is now 87.9 grams. Now we're ready to get our egg prepared for the third and final step in our process. So for the third part of the egg experiment, we will be soaking our egg in cornstarch. So what you'll need for this step is some syrup and the same egg that we've now soaked in vinegar and colored water. So all I'm going to do is carefully place my egg right back into that same beaker. And then just as I did with the vinegar and the water, pour the corn syrup over top of the egg until it is submerged. Now, since my corn syrup is much more dense, hopefully you can see this, my egg is actually trying to float on top of the corn syrup instead of sinking to the bottom like it did with the water and the vinegar. So all I'm going to do to fix that is carefully take a spoon and place it on the egg, push it underneath, and leave the spoon resting on top to keep the egg submerged. Now for our final step, we will do the same thing. We will leave this egg soaking for 24 hours and we'll be back then to check on it.
You guessed it. 24 more hours later.
All right, so it has now been another 24 hours and we are ready for the last set of measurements in our egg experiment. So here I have my egg that has been soaking in cornstarch for 24 hours. And as you can see, my cornstarch has become very liquidy and my egg is all shriveled up and small. So I am going to very, very, very carefully go ahead and remove my egg from the cornstarch. As you can see, it's pretty shrivelly. It would be very, very, very easy to break. So once I have my egg mostly dried off and my scale turned on and zeroed, I am going to go ahead and very carefully place my egg onto the scale. Here we can see that the mass of my egg is now 49.7 grams. I'm also going to take this opportunity to measure the length, which I see is about 5.5 centimeters, and the width, which I can see is about 3.5 centimeters. Wow, what a change. Now we're all finished with our experiment and you are ready to analyze the data that we've collected and draw some conclusions about what has taken place.